Hey, what's up, YouTube? There's a popular question out right now, an idea, a concept. Is Linux dead? A lot of this comes from the Ubuntu community. People feel like Ubuntu hasn't really grown. It's kind of stuck where it's at. Well, that's cool. You can look at it that way. Ubuntu is kind of at a standstill. See, it's not that Linux is dead. 10 years ago, Ubuntu was one of many flavors of Linux, yes, but now there are so many more flavors of Linux. You got to understand that these Linux operating systems, even though you have, like Mint and Ubuntu, for example, are not the same, they're still very similar. A developer on Ubuntu doesn't need to take a huge leap in education to get over to Mint. It's most of the difference is the business model on and how the companies that formulate the software function. Uh, is Linux dead? Google, people don't know this, but Android is Google's operating system. You can get a Chromebook, right? If you didn't notice, the Chromebook, it looks like Windows. It's not Windows. It's Google operating system. It's a Linux distro, yo. It's Google. Android, Android software, your Droid, your cell phone, Android software is a Linux distribution. It's just like Ubuntu. It's just like Mint. It's just like all the other Kubuntu. We can go on for hours and hours naming off, penis measurements. Who knows the most flavors of Linux? It's very much alive. All right. Now you still have huge audiences, the Mac guys and the PC guys. They're all, they think their operating system is the coolest thing ever, and they'll never figure it out, and that's fine. We don't want them in the Linux community anyway. That's just the kind of mentality we don't want entering into this egalitarian community. Linux is alive and well. In fact, Droids are the number one computer owned in the world. There are more droids out there now than any other type of computer. You have more people accessing the internet on a droid than any other type of computer. Now, the $25 track phone, I got one right here. I was poor and my old phone broke, and I was broke. My old phone broke at the time, and I had to buy this $25 Samsung pay-as-you-go phone so I can hold over till the next paycheck. This was $25. It's got like just under a gigahertz processor, single core. It's got a half a gig of RAM. I mean, those aren't great specs or nothing, but this is plenty to surf the internet, to run a Linux distro. All right, so is Linux dead? No, Linux is dominated. We won. The Linux nerds, we won. And to this day, I can customize a Ubuntu desktop to look j- phenomenal, just absolutely beautiful. People are just stunned to this day. I mean, these are a lot of these tricks that I use to customize a Ubuntu desktop are 10 years old. I mean, some of this stuff I've been doing literally since, I was a kid. I mean, so is Linux dead? No, Linux is the big dog winner. Now, of course, you've got, Apple and Apple and Windows do provide a certain thing for the public. Let's face it. I've tried to teach many people Ubuntu and Linux operating systems in person, and it's challenging. When you learn Ubuntu or any other Linux distro, and then you look back on it, it's like, oh, Linux is easy. I don't know why it was so difficult, but the learning process is a challenge, and people don't pick up on it very well. They struggle with Linux, and that's okay. We want to be cool, right? We want to be smart. It feeds the ego. I can run Linux systems. Can you run Linux systems? No. Now you got the Apple guys and the Mac guys and the PC guys, and they think that they're, like they're all trendy and on the bandwagon, and they think they're like cool, or somehow they are, identify with this tribalism, this team thing. I look, I'm running. I'm filming back here. I'm running Mac, Windows, and Linux. Okay, I'm running all of it. I mean, I don't really even get these guys. You know, stay out of the tribalism and the infighting. The Mac is better, the Linux is better, the PC is better. Look, you aren't. If you start off with Linux, that's probably a smart idea, but that's very unlikely. You don't get to Linux until you've learned a thing or two about Windows or Mac. I mean, who's better? I mean, if you really want my opinion, Linux users are vastly superior to Mac and PC users, because your average Linux user already knows Windows and Mac, and that's why they went to Linux, because of the problems with Windows and Mac. And so don't get into that. Linux is the king. Linux is the big dog. Linux isn't going anywhere. So if you haven't had a chance to learn Linux or get started or join the community, you can check out my tutorials. They're pretty basic. I tried my hardest to show people what's going on, but I mean, Linux installs are easy, but every single time I do it, there's something new. I mean, I don't do it every single day, probably once a month. I end up, tinkering with some kind of Linux issue that I have to work out, but I don't do it every single day. And as time goes on, the systems upgrade and they update. I don't configure a Linux install every single day. So I mean, you can look at my tutorials. I don't know. I'm using Ubuntu for these tutorials. I don't know. Maybe you've got Mythbuntu or whatever. So you just kind of gotta use your head, but the order of operations, the concepts are exactly the same. No matter which distro you're using, no matter how much time goes by, it's always the same thing. Dual boot, you separate your partitions correctly, install correctly, make sure that the MBR and the grub thing is worked out, and that's really all there is to it. And then of course, there's more to configuring Ubuntu or whatever, but getting up and running and getting started is easy. Is Linux dead? No. Linux is the king. And if you want to play like you're all cool or whatever, and you're a Mac guy or you're a Windows guy, if you want to play into that mentality, you're going to get left in the dust on this one. You see, the next level of computing really is the Droids. PC desktops are not dead. There will always be PC desktops. There will always be. The PC desktop comes from an old hacker network that was all about building computers from scratch when there was no software, and this is an old community. I mean, PC desktops will always be here. People will always want to tinker with state-of-the-art electronics, state-of-the-art circuitry. Now, the Droids, though, and this is 2014 right now. Next year, 2015, 2016, there robots walking around and stuff. Like the Droid computer. The Droid computer is gonna, I'm working on a system right now. The system that I'm filming on is a quad-core 3.6 gigahertz AMD processor with 8 gigabits of RAM. 8 gigabytes of RAM. So that is going to be my phone probably by 2015, 2016. So we're going to be walking around with computers that possess the same processing power, that you have to really, really stretch your budget to build and create, and this big boxy home computer or whatever. I'm going to be able to dual boot these things. You already can, but it's just a pain in the butt. I don't recommend dual booting a Droid yet. But in the near future, especially as the Windows phones get a little bit more bulky and they all compete to have the best specs, and they're all competing to get us hackers, us Linux users, they're going to make these things just like PCs where we can do all this crazy stuff. Of course, the goal is to make it so that we can't have access to all that stuff, but they're not going to do it because Linux is open source, and we just won't support it. Samsung is developing their own operating system. It's going to be in direct competition with Google Android. Firefox has their own. operating system coming out. Ubuntu has a cell phone operating system. You should go to ubuntu.com and check it out. I'm using Ting. Hey, you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching, and Linux is king. Keep going, guys. Don't give up the fight. Open source everything. Open source computers, open source government. See you soon. Subscribe, like, and comment.